Okay guys, we're going to do a build. This is all the NexxSpeed stuff, and we're going to put it together, build a rig. Let's go. So first things first is the actual chassis. Let's see what this guy's about. So this is the aluminum carbon fiber conversion chassis kit. So I don't know how much of a stock is used here. I think it's got trays and plates and everything. So all you really need is, transmission, belly plate. We'll see here. Here's instructions. So pretty much just the chassis. Does not come with the skid plate. Or the screws. It looks like it's asking you to use your stock screws, so that's fine. Interesting. It comes with Phillips head screws for some stuff. I don't know if I'm a fan of that, but let's get it together and we'll see. Extra wire. Is that what they're showing here? To extend your servo wire? That's weird. I've never seen that in a kit before, but hey. I don't know what this is about. Please check your model helicopter before you attempt to fly. Did they think this was a helicopter? We'll get there. Let's figure it out. Alright, I'm going to start off the bat here. I am not a fan of Phillips head screws on these things. These are very tiny screws, so I get that. Sometimes when you have very tiny screws, you need to use Phillips head, but I think these are still 1.4. These ones may not be. These look almost smaller than a 1.4. Let's see. No, they're still 1.4s. Yeah, those should be, these should be hex heads. I don't know why they're Phillips heads. That's horrible. Hobby grade stuff should be hex. Nobody wants to use Phillips heads. They're a pain to work with, but that's the first time we've ever seen an SCX24 kit using Phillips heads like that. Pretty interesting. We're not going to judge it just yet, because the chassis seemed very cool. That's why we wanted to get it. But, man, I didn't know it came with Phillips head screws. That was a first ever. Even these guys, Phillips heads. So, I just want to point out, it comes with 3 of these cross brace rods, and they've got the screws already in there. And these are the screws they come with. So there are some M1.4 by 4s and M1.4 by 5s. And they're already in these rods, so you don't know which one they are. So when you pull the screws out, just pay attention. The smaller ones are going to go on the topmost portion up here, right? So at the top of your chassis. Those are going to be your small screws for the cross brace on the top of the chassis. And that's because the longer screws are needed for when these plates sit on top of the chassis rail. You're going to need the 1.5s or 1.4s by 5s to go through to the cross brace tube, right? So they're all longer ones except one, and that one with the shorter ones goes on the top of the chassis, just so you know. So one thing to be aware of is the aluminum chassis is threaded at some points, like right here and here, right? These are threaded holes, as well as the hole that this goes into, right? This hole here is threaded, which means you need to make sure the plastic is all the way up against this roof line, is all the way up against the chassis as you screw it in, because you can't just push the screw through and then tighten it. You have to actually make sure it is tight up against the chassis as you screw it in. Okay? Otherwise, it'll just push it away, right? If you screw that all the way in, you won't be able to tighten it anymore. You could break the screw off inside there if you're trying to tighten it all the way in. And screw it as it's, away from the chassis. Anyway, so it's pretty simple here. Again, just putting the screws in, putting the braces in, pretty straightforward. So we'll just do the one side, and then we'll go ahead and do this other side. One thing of note, don't put this piece on until you have it mounted, because you use this hole here. So if you screw that on, you're going to have to unscrew it to put this on. The front one doesn't cover anything except for these front screw holes actually for a bumper. So if you're going to put a bumper on, which we actually might, we might have to end up pulling this back off to put our bumper screws in. And there's the built chassis. I like that the lid or the roof just opens up so you can get access to your electronics or battery, stuff like that. Pretty cool. These last 4 screws with little tiny bolts or nuts, excuse me, those are for your shocks, I believe. I think that's too short for the shocks. At least you can use the nuts for the shocks though, right? So even if these screws are too short, they at least include the nuts to put on the back of the M1.4 bolts that your shocks are held in with. Oh my god. These guys. Because I don't know where else these countersunk little guys can go. That's there, they're countersunk. I guess the front, 1, 2, 3, 4, front and rear here. If you have something bolting to those countersunk spots. It does not say in here. It actually doesn't even show the nuts. So, also, if you're not going to check your screws, always make sure you Loctite. Don't Loctite anything going into the plastic though, because you will degrade the plastic. But Loctite anything going into aluminum, and then you don't have to worry about backing out on you. But do not Loctite these two, because they go into plastic, and Loctite degrades plastic, unless it's plastic safe, obviously. And actually, we're going to go ahead and throw this front bumper on. So they've got this bumper here. It's pretty slick looking. They make them in a bunch of different colors. All this stuff comes in a bunch of different colors, so we'll show some of that. Here are the different color chassis. And then here's this. It's the bumper mount, which can be used for other bumpers as well. But then there's this bumper. This is the black. Figured we'll get black since it already comes with red D-rings. Black, red, and silver will be our thing. So let's put this on here. We're going to have to pull these panels back off, like I said, though. And we're going to have to use these countersunks here underneath the carbon fiber panel versus the screws that come in there. Those screws that come in there will not fit underneath the panels, so that's why they provide you with some extras, I guess. Here's the instructions for the front bumper. You can pause on that if you want to look some more. Here's that front bumper. It's got a carbon fiber plate and aluminum D-rings. You can see how it all comes apart. There's even light bucket holders here, little plastic pieces that pop out. You can see here. Okay, and the 2 screws. And then our bracket here. Also, if you were curious, where did it go? What these holes are for in these aluminum braces, it's so you can stick a safety pin through or something along those lines, and then you can hold it while you tighten so it doesn't spin. Right, so the rod doesn't spin. That's what that's for. All right, and there we have it. So we're going to basically take this stock C10. It's just a totally stock C10, other than the body mounts, the way we mounted the body, and this hot racing bumper we've got on here. We're going to take this thing and we're going to put it in this guy here, at least as our starting point. And then we've got all kinds of goodies. I don't know if any of these trays actually are for this. I don't think they are. I think they're more for a stock one, so we'll have to look at those separate. But we've got some diff covers, these wheel covers, some weights, knuckles, servo tray, some hexes, some aluminum transmission gear set, stuff like that. Even have a pinion here. So we will get this stuff. Let's just get the stock stuff on here, and we'll do like the stock rig, and we'll show you that first, and then we can upgrade stuff. Now, to throw your stock rig onto this new chassis, it's simple. All you got to do is remove 12 bolts, essentially. There's 1 for shock, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So your skid plate and your 2 shocks, right, on each side. And the whole thing will drop out, and then you can just put it in here. Simple as that. Ta-da! So there's the chassis with all the links and shocks and belly plate pulled out. And there's all our links, shocks, and belly plate. Again, just 12 screws. It's pretty simple for a quick, easy conversion over. And we're going to throw this guy in there. All right, so I just wanted to show you this. We kind of got it all put together. Well, it's not all put together. We don't have the screws in the shocks or the drive shafts in or anything right now. I just wanted to show you the shock positions and what it looks like with the C10. We did have to remove this front bumper because the front bumper, when it's on there, is hit by the servo, so you get no compression. So we went ahead and removed it, and the shocks are as far forward as possible with the C10 fronts. So I'm thinking this is a cool looking kind of hot roddy, rock bouncery look with the long front. But I think this chassis really wants a deadbolt is what it wants versus the C10 length, Bronco or JLU. You're going to want a deadbolt or a Betty length. So that'll bring the back out a little bit further and bring the front in more. So we're going to switch over to a deadbolt. We've got a stock deadbolt here, so we'll pull this guy apart and we'll put it in here. And here's the deadbolt. You can see it's much shorter in the front, have a better shock angle, and the rear is much longer. And here they are side by side. You can see the deadbolt versus the C10. Now, it looks like you can run the bumper on the front. The stock servo it'll hit a little bit, but it's not a big deal. Okay. I mean, it does hit a little bit, you still get all your articulation, most of it. And if you wanted to, you could completely remove it and just run it without it, and then you could drop your shocks way lower and you'd get a ton of articulation. So there's a lot of good adjustability. One of the cool things about this chassis, but it definitely seems like it's more fit for a deadbolt than a C10 JLU Bronco. The shorter fronts with longer rears is far more fitting. The front's just way too long with the C10 front end. Unless you like that look, I guess. You know, if you like that real kind of stretched out, almost hot rod look, go for it. This is already pretty hot rod as it is, but definitely fits the deadbolt better. If you were to do long travel shocks on the front, then the C10 might work out a little better. I don't know, it's hard to say, but you get a lot of tuning options, so that's pretty cool. All right, let's keep doing some stuff. Here we go, all hooked up. Got our stock servo hooked up, stock electronics, stock motor. It's all tucked in there. Got a little bit extra wire because we're using an adapter for our battery. There's a little bit extra wire there. Also, we didn't want to cut our servo, so we're using an extension for that to use the stock servo because it's super short. So we just got a little extension in there. So that's why there's a little bit extra wire. And if you're using an Emax or any aftermarket servo, you would have plenty of length. You wouldn't have to worry about adding it. And again, we're using an adapter for our battery because we like the red JST style adapter. So anyway, we're all hooked up and we're all good to go now. Pretty cool looking chassis for sure. So we're going to want to go ahead and add on some of the other stuff that we got. Like I said, maybe we'll do these steering knuckles, our diff covers, because they're cool looking red. We'll probably put these weighted wheel extensions on there. Those are awesome. These cool red stock wheel covers. And probably try to do the servo mount. We'll see how this stuff goes. Let's get it. All right, we got our stock knuckles off. Just 4 screws, right? Once you get your wheels and tires off, just 4 screws, pretty simple. I guess 6 because you got to take your steering link off. Or upside down there. So we're going to weigh them real quick just to compare. These are just aluminum, they're not brass, but they look like they're pretty quality. And just want to see the difference between the weight. So we're at 5.3 grams for the aluminum and 1.85. So like almost 2.5, 3 times. Not quite 3, but close. So they're definitely a little bit extra weight, which is nice. Plus, you're less likely to break, right? These are much thicker. Look at that. It's a much thicker piece right there. And they look cool. These look good, right? There's the NS logo there. We also have the front diffs covers. These are much thicker. We'll pull off the diff cover here. We'll do the servo while we're at it as well. And we'll weigh those up real quick. All right, we got the front diff cover off. Don't forget to remove your bearing here. when you're removing your bearing, just be careful. You want to make sure you don't, break the bearing or, mess up the balls on the race. It's kind of a pain in the butt to get out sometimes, but you just slowly work it out. Something you can do, we don't want to pull it all apart, but if your spur gear is already out, or not your spur gear, I'm sorry, your worm gear, sometimes you can use the worm gear portion where it hooks into the bearing to kind of pull it out. See what I'm doing here? There you go. See, like that. Now, it'd be easier if we were to take the worm gear out, but it's hooked to our drive shaft still. So we'll just do it like that. All right. It's got a little dirty. Let's clean it up. I'm just trying to clean that up a little. It's not much, but it's going to add to the weight. So if we get some of that grease out of there, we'll get more accurate reading. All right, so here's a stock. It's 0.5 gram. And there's the aluminum, 3 grams. So 6 times heavier. So that added weight will help. It's not a brass diff cover, which could be, 10 grams, sometimes more, 20 grams. But if you're just looking for that little bit extra, this stuff adds up, right? So that's, what are we at, 8.5 versus 2.5. So pretty big difference. We're also going to do the servo tray while we're at it. Since we've got this all apart, might as well do the servo tray. So the servo does work with the stock servo or Emax servo. So it shows you 2 different ways to install it based on whether you're using stock or Emax. Basically the little servo mounts are in different positions. So there's an Emax. You can see same width as the stock, so it definitely fits. It's just a matter of how forward or backward it sits. Some of the other servos, like the NSDRC, I don't know if they're going to work with this guy. Let's see. So they'll fit, but like width-wise, right? But length-wise, they're not going to fit. Even if you're to move this forward a little bit, you'll have to still put a spacer. It'll fit. You just have to put some sort of a spacer. And it does not come with extra spacers. So just be aware. You can make a spacer out of like antenna tube, for an antenna, old school antenna tubes, or even like a old pen tube, right? From a ballpoint pen, you can cut the tube and kind of put a spacer in there, or aluminum or whatever. You just got to be able to space it out a little bit, space it forward, and it will be sticking out forward. Ideally, this would be a higher up plate. The plate would sit a little higher so that you could actually mount it over where the links would go, right? That would be ideal for the servo mount, but this works. Again, it's for the Emax or the stock mostly. And again, you can use it for these. You'll just have to put a spacer in. Now, one other downside to this specific servo mount is if you were to try to do a 4-link suspension where your links attach to the outside here, right? You're gonna have a link here and a link here. Only one side is threaded. So you would have to get a extra long screw to go through and try to thread all the way through both links, basically from this side, right? Because this side is not threaded. So you can just put your long screw through and it would have to go, actually that wouldn't work at all. Well, you could, you'd have to put a nut on the end. Because usually when you do 4-link, you have a screw on this side and a screw on this side. So ideally, if they wanted to improve this servo tray, they would raise up the servo tray a little bit so that your servo can slide over the links and then thread both sides of the links, or both sides of the mount where your links go. So you can put a screw in that way and a screw in this way. But for now, this does not hold. So that's unfortunate. There are some, I think Injora's links come with a centerpiece that you can put in here that is threaded, so you can actually thread your screw into that centerpiece, which is super nice. So if the link set comes with that, then you can use this for 4-link. But if not, you're gonna have to figure out a better way to do your 4-link. You can also make like a servo, take a servo horn, like this piece right here, and stick it in the middle, or screw to that, put it like that and have your screw go into the servo horn. But you definitely need something to screw into. So just be aware of that. If you're 3-linking, no problem. You just put your 1 screw in. But if you're 4-linking, that could be an issue. All right, let's go ahead and get our servo in. All right, we got our servo tray back in and our diff cover. The fitment is good. It all fits great. One nice thing is that all of this stuff, the knuckles, the diff cover, the servo tray, it all comes with all the hardware you need. You could use your stock hardware. That's what we're doing. We're just using the stock hardware, but it is nice that it comes with the extra hardware in case you're building from the ground up. You don't have to worry about getting hardware. The diff cover comes with all the screws. The knuckles comes with all the screws. Everything you need. So that's awesome. All right, we're going to go ahead and get our knuckles on now, and then we'll do our back diff cover. Now, when you're putting knuckles in, you want to be very careful not to lose these bushings. So I like to put the bushings on the screw first. That makes it a lot easier to put in. If you try to put your bushing in there, it could easily fall out. So put your bushing on your screw and then go ahead and screw it in. Another thing you want to be careful of is not to over tighten these. If your screw is over tightened and it is going too far into the knuckle here, it can actually hit your dog bone. I don't know if you can see in there very well, but you just want to make sure you're not, for some reason your screws aren't longer, or you're not tightening it down too much to where it actually has the screw protruding into where the dog bone is. That'll cause binding and you can break your dog bone with that. Also, your steering knuckle should be pretty loose, right? It should move freely. It shouldn't have a lot of binding in that or resistance. So if you have too much, you can just back your knuckles off just a little bit. There you go, and it just flop down. See that? That's what they should be like. They should just flop. Because these screws are going into plastic, it's pretty unlikely that they're going to back out. You can tighten them down just enough until they basically, if that happens, you're too much, just back it off quarter turn, and should be good. There we go. Okay, that's what you want to see. Now, when you're putting your thread in here, your steering link thread, if you've got a Bronco, you need to be careful. And I believe the Gladiator as well. I think they're coarse thread, so just make sure your threading is fine thread if you're going into the aluminum. If you try to put a coarse thread in there, or feels like it doesn't want to go, you need to figure out a different setup or change your steering links or something, because some stock SCX24s come with a coarse thread on the steering links, and that would be bad. Putting a coarse thread into aluminum that's meant for fine thread. Again, that's this threading right here. You can tell the coarse thread by comparing it to any of the other screws that come with the kit. They'll be much further apart in their spacing, and they're meant to go into plastic. Trying to put a coarse thread into aluminum fine thread will cause your screw to break, or your this ball joint stud to break off inside there, and that is bad times. It means you got to get new knuckles. So just be aware of that. We didn't show that one, but make sure you put your bearings in. And if for some reason your wheels seem like they're like this, you've got your knuckles on the wrong sides. Just flip the sides. Flip your knuckles to the other side. This, right? Unless you want that look. If you want it to look like you're kind of all cambered out. And there we have it. All hooked up. Looks good. I love the red. The red looks awesome. All right, let's go ahead and get our wheels and tires back on. We're going to be using these guys. These are 6mm hub extenders, so they're going to make our track a lot wider. All right, we're going to go ahead and weigh these guys. They're 5.7 grams each. That puts us at 22.79, 22.8 grams. We also have brass barrel nuts. These are called barrel nuts. And these guys are going to add a little extra as well. So we're at 24.65. 24 grams of extra weight. These little barrel nuts are almost 2 grams just by themselves. It also comes with your axle pins. We won't need those since we have the stock ones. But if you were building from scratch, you would need those, so awesome that it comes with it. Now, something I've talked about in a lot of my other videos, you want to make sure when you tighten your wheels down, you don't over tighten. If you do, you're going to end up pushing, even on these stock plastic ones. See how they've got this kind of little ledge or lip or nipple on the end of the wheel hex? These have it as well, right? And a lot of times we will sand these down until the pin actually sits on the inside where the stop is, on the inside there. So it's when you're tightening it down, you actually tighten it down up against the axle pin here. These look pretty deep, how far they are, so I don't know if even grinding these all the way down to the flush with this will let it sit on the axle pin, but that's fine. All it means is make sure when you're tightening down, you don't tighten it down so tight that the wheel doesn't freely move. The wheel should freely move completely, almost so much so that you can blow on it and it just moves, right? So just be aware when we're tightening these down that we don't over tighten them, okay? If you want to though, you could try to grind this down or sand it down so that you can get a little bit extra sitting on the axle pin itself. I don't know if you can see that in there, but the axle pin. Anyway, so we're going to throw these on there. We've also got these guys, which are just kind of fun. Now, most people replace their wheels completely, so I don't know how popular these will be, but they're cool. You can throw them on top of your stock axle or stock wheels, and you get kind of... These barrel nuts are pretty tight on the wheel. Yeah, so you're going to have to push. You're going to have to push onto the wheel at least a little bit to get the barrel nut to go on. Again, super loose. You want it super loose. The other nice thing about these hexes is not only are you adding some decent weight, you're extending your wheelbase quite a bit. And we'll show you that once we get this other side on, the difference between the front and the rear. All right, we have our fronts on. So I'll go ahead and show you I don't know if you can see it there, but a little bit of a difference, right? If I go front about here and the back, big difference, right? That's a huge difference. Okay. And that's going to help you just climb better in general. The only thing that it might hurt is you might end up high centering a little bit more often on your diff if you're not hitting your lines correctly, but it's going to mean you can side hill a lot better. It's just having a wider track is almost always better, even if it means you high center on the pumpkin a little. Just means you got to make sure you hit your lines that you don't high center on, but it does let you hit better lines. All right, let's get the back on and this rear diff cover. Alrighty, rear diff's all on. Front diff's all on, servo tray, steering knuckles, extra width. I'm digging it. Kind of fun. It's definitely a cool looking chassis. I mean, there's some similar ones, but this one's different for sure. The 3D printed roof is kind of nice. You can get up in there. Carbon fiber accents is pretty cool. Again, they make them in a bunch of different colors, so that's cool. It goes. I have to go put it on the rocks. Kind of surprised they don't make any steering links. I feel like I looked on the site and I didn't see any steering links. All right, let's go run it. It's gonna be on stock tires though, so bear with that. Keep that in mind, stock tires. And really, it's just more to show it off on the rocks because it looks cool. If we were really trying to show performance, we'd need to change our tires out. But again, a chassis, as long as you've got good, geometry, which this does, you should be fine as far as crawling is concerned. You got enough weight and stuff, so any issues that we find are probably going to be due to the tires. So keep that in mind. lost steering. Stock servos, no bueno. Yep, no steering. That sucks. Well, at least you guys see a little bit here. We're gonna have to get a new servo in there. Alrighty, guys. Get back to the lab. Alrighty, guys. Hope you enjoyed this build. Unfortunately, the servo was kind of giving out. We got it working again, but I mean, it doesn't work well. It's a stock servo. What do you expect? We'll get a new one in there. We've got some Emaxes and some other higher end ones. I don't know what we're gonna put in here yet, but I did want to show it with the stock build on there. Basically, buy your $110 deadbolt and throw this chassis on there, and you've got a totally different rig. It's pretty cool. Anyway, we'll put a link to all the products in the description, and yeah, hopefully you learned something. If you were interested in this chassis, if you'd seen it around, now you know a little bit more about it. And yeah, I think it was a fine build. I enjoyed it. I do wish that these were hexes versus Phillips heads, but I kind of understand why they used Phillips heads, especially in the countersunk portions. You kind of have to. But you could always replace them with hexes if you really wanted to, but the Phillips heads allow them to be real sleek and flat. That's, I think, really why they did it. But it's not really that big of a deal. You still use your stock hexes in all the spots where it matters. So, but yeah, definitely dig it. It's kind of fun. It'd be fun to try to upgrade it. You don't have a whole lot of room for the motor. You definitely have to use something smaller. I think you could probably fit like a Nano Beast in there, a Mofo Nano Beast, or a Furatech Micro Komodo. You'd be probably fine fitting that in there. And then any of the normal brushless stuff, or brushed stuff, excuse me, the normal sized cans, even like the Enjoras, you might have to trim out the battery tray in the back, or the ESC tray, this tray in the back here, to get some of the longer ones in, but not a big deal at all. I don't even know if you'd have to. It's pretty close. You can see the motor there. The tray starts right there where the window is. So you've got a little bit of space, but not a big deal if you had to trim it. Yeah, the biggest issue is obviously the wheels and tires here. Well, the tires more than the wheels, right? Wheels don't really matter much, but the tires being stock, it's going to slide a lot, as you saw in the little bit of running footage we did. Anyway, enough ranting on this. Like I said, hope you learned something. Hope you found out what you wanted to find out about the NexxSpeed, not to be confused with Nex Racing, two totally different companies. And yeah, make sure you do the likes, the subscribes, the shares, notification bell, comment down below. Why don't you comment down below hedgehog? Because this guy looks like a hedgehog. Look at that. Almost wish we would have got blue. We would have done it all blue. If I, after seeing it in person, it looks like a hedgehog. Kind of cool. Definitely should have gotten all blue parts, but it is what it is. We got red. All right, guys. Until next time, get out there, build something, run your cars, crash them, smash them, bash them, but don't break the expensive parts. Servo.